So we're going to look at who's still around, who's trying to stay around, and who is long gone.
And who is just not showing up at the reunion because they're just embarrassed.
We don't have their contact information and we couldn't find them.
Welcome to Get to the Hook. I am your co-host, Charles Latibaudier.
And I'm your co-host, Eric Colley.
This is going to be a very exciting week because we are about to hold a class reunion. And for all the people who listen and think that we are just two old Gen X dudes.
I mean, we are, but...
we are. But we listen to, some younger music too. And this week, our reunion is in honor of, I guess you would say, if we're having a class reunion, the current king and queen of the prom. That would be Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga, who put out a song together.
Right, and this is the first new music they put out in a while. Lady Gaga did have the song Hold My Hand on the Top Gun soundtrack. But before that, her last album was in 2020, Chromatica. Bruno Mars hasn't put an album out since the Silk Sonic project with Anderson .Paak in 2021.
And his last solo before that was
24 Karat Magic, I think. So it's been a while. They've been laying low, but they are back.
They are back, and there are a lot of people of their class that came out. 2010 was, I mean, until you started putting this list together, I didn't realize how many real heavy hitters we got out in 2010 that we got out of that year.
And there was kind of a changing of the guard around that time. I mean, Gaga was a little bit before. She, came out in 2008, really hit in 2009. But you saw a whole new batch of stars really kind of taking over music, and a lot of bigger names just sort of faded away. And a lot of those people from around 2010 are still the top of the heap of the music pile there. So we're going to look at who's still around, who's trying to stay around, and who is long gone.
And who is just not showing up at the reunion because they're just embarrassed.
We don't have their contact information and we couldn't find them.
we tried to get in touch with them, but we couldn't. So let's start with our prom king and queen.
The new song out, this is Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars. The song is called Die With a Smile.
If the world was ending, I wanna be next to you.
It's a grower.
Yeah, I get why some people, when they first heard it, they were disappointed because it's a kind of a ballad, but it's trying to be a little upbeat. But
you think he did Uptown Funk. She has all those classic dance songs. I think people thought there was going to be some big up tempo kind of thing. But this is what they do. It sounds like a Bruno Mars song. It sounds like a Lady Gaga song.
Yeah.
And I don't know yet if it's going to be in Joker Folie à Deux, the movie. She's playing Harley Quinn in it. I mean, Die With a Smile seems like it's set up for Joker, and she's kind of wearing that kind of eye makeup in all the art in the video for this.
Yeah, and by the way, something I haven't said in a long time because we just don't watch videos that much anymore. Yeah. But when I first listened to the song, I watched the video, and it kind of made me like it a little bit more. It was a little hokey,
a little campy, like 70s country kind of outfits, but it's in no way a country song.
Yeah.
It's like George Jones and Tammy Wynette or something. She's got the cigarette
with
going.
the cigarette in her mouth, and there's actually a verse where she's singing with the cigarette in her mouth, and it sounds like it.
Yeah. I think people are ready for them to be back. Certainly Bruno Mars. It seems like it's been a long time. And the song's doing all right. It's probably not going to debut at number one because also somebody else from the mid 2000s, Post Malone's country albums come out.
Yep. Someone else at the reunion who's doing very well.
But as of right now, the song's expected to debut around number 11, just outside the top 10. But Bruno Mars and Gaga are both people who get a lot of airplay. Bruno Mars has never had a song debut at number one. His songs always build. Yeah.
Right.
And it's actually from Friday when the song came out, over the next couple of days, it's actually increased in streaming. So it wasn't all super front-loaded.
So it might be a slow burn.
I could see, especially if it's tied to that movie in October through the fall, radio's going to eat this up.
Yeah.
And so...
Yeah, that's a radio hit.
I think this one will do pretty well. They were... 2010 is when Bruno Mars first hit with his first song as an artist was actually him featured on B.O.B.'s Nothing on You. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And B.O.B. came out of the gate pretty strong in 2010. Had that, Airplanes with Haley Williams, Magic with Rivers Cuomo, Strange Clouds the next year. B.O.B. now has turned against the music industry. He is disillusioned by it, and he is a flat earther conspiracy theorist. So that's what happened to B.O.B. of the class of 2010. Bruno Mars.
You want him to show up at the reunion because you want to have the converson with the flat earther and be like, so tell me about this guy.
B.O.B., we haven't seen you around in a while. Because nothing is around. That's why. Bruno Mars, of course, then came out with Just the Way You Are, Grenade, and was off and running. And he's never really had a flop honestly. I mean,
Yeah, ever since he took off there, like,
yeah, he just doesn't release music as often now, but every time he does, it does
makes
well.
it count.
Yeah, and almost 15 years in, that's pretty impressive.
It really is. And
Gaga still, even when her albums, some didn't do better than others, none of them outright flopped. Like every one of her albums had at least one pretty big sized hit on it. The albums did well. And not that she needs it. She's set for life. She can perform
right.
for as long as she wants. And that's sort of these next two artists we're going to look at from 2010 who were really huge that year. They are both launching comebacks right now in different ways to varying degrees. The reception's been different. So Katy Perry in 2010, that's when her Teenage Dream album came out. That album
Okay.
produced 5 #1 singles, along with Michael Jackson's Bad, the only 2 albums ever to do that.
Wow.
She was such a huge, dominant star at that time. Now, it's been a few years. She's been doing American Idol. She
Right.
left Idol to relaunch her pop star career. The first single she put out was Woman's World, written by Dr. Luke. People were not happy about that.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I am really surprised at how much the public has held on to that battle between Kesha and Dr. Luke, and how much people really cared that they've held it against her. Because we've always said that people get to make, if you write a hit, that's all that matters. If they
Right.
like the song, then that's all they're going to care about. But it seems like Katy Perry's being held to a different standard.
Well, they also didn't like the song.
No. Oh,
with
well,
Woman's World.
then
And so
there's
now
that.
she's moved on from that, and she's already said that was satire, which I don't think she meant it to be that way. So we're moving on to the second single before her new album comes out. This song sounds like an early 90s house song. This is Katy Perry's Lifetimes.
Can you believe it? I'm gonna love you till the end and then repeat it.
Yeah,
But now she's had this controversy for that because she filmed the video at the Ses Palmador Island off the coast of Spain, and
the
maybe-
Spanish government is all up
Yeah.
in arms about this, that she wasn't supposed to shoot there, and that it's protected, a protected beach.
she might have trampled some dunes. So
She says, we should say, and on her, for her part, she says that she actually got clearance from the people who actually give out the clearance. But that always seemed weird to me, because if you did, then how come they didn't tell their superiors in the Spanish
Right.
government? I don't know. Someone's not telling the full story,
Yeah.
but we'll see what happens with that.
But Katy Perry, when she did her Las Vegas residency a few years ago, kind of reminded people because she doesn't have big hits like she used to. But
But she has enough hits. that,
she has so many hits. And you'd think she could just be like, okay, I'll just tour, people will love me, but she still wants to be a pop star. And this whole new era has not been going the way she wanted it to at all so far.
it's weird that, how maybe they just still want Teenage Dream, and like she's just
Possibly.
not that person anymore. It's not that artist. She's older, and she would say wiser, I'm sure. And why do you want the same thing? Like, let her evolve.
Yeah, although it doesn't help that the songs she's doing kind of sound like the same song she was
It does.
doing.
It does sound like
2010.
she's trying to resurrect that, and maybe just
Yeah.
not
So
landing there.
maybe if we're doing the class reunion metaphor kind of thing, she's like the pretty girl that still, those were her best days, and you see her and she still looks good.
Still looks
So
good.
she's like, you guys remember 11th grade? And we're like, yeah, that was 15 years ago. But cool.
but maybe she's more attainable now.
Maybe.
Maybe, except for
No, she's still
except she
Katy
showed
Perry.
up. Except she showed up with Orlando Bloom. So you're like,
Yeah.
oh, she's not attainable. Yeah.
And yeah, it's Katy Perry. We know
Yeah.
how she looks. But you mentioned Kesha earlier. Kesha, her big
Yeah.
breakout year as an artist was 2010. She actually had the very first #1 song of that year and of the decade. January, she hit the top with TikTok. And I think it's funny, I saw people talk about the 2010s in a retrospective saying it was the decade of from TikTok to TikTok. Basically going from Kesha at the
Right.
beginning to obviously TikTok, the
TikTok.
app,
Right.
determining what's popular now. Kesha's making a comeback. And this is her first new album completely independent. Because as you said, she had not just problems with Dr. Luke.
Yes.
She said he sexually assaulted her, was horrible, and she wanted to get out of the contract because she was on his record label. She is done with all that now. She's doing her own thing. And I think she knows she's not going to be, shooting to #1 like she was back in 2010. But she has kept her audience. They have rooted for her all along. She is very, very beloved. And this song, and a lot of her audience is like gay men. And I think she tailored this song to them. This is her new song,
Which is a
Joyride.
smart move, by the way.
Yeah.
Deepest night your life. Get in, lose it for the joyride.
You know what's weird? As the fans have sort of pitted Katy Perry against her because Katy Perry worked with Dr. Luke, but both songs kind of have the same feel.
They're not vastly different than each
Yeah.
other. Yeah, I don't know. But when Katy Perry put out Woman's World, remember, we all had to kind of read into this, but Kesha just commented LOL, like just posted LOL.
Right.
And she never said specifically it was about Katy Perry and working with Dr. Luke, but I think people could kind of read between the lines on it.
Yeah, it's interesting that they both ended up with very similar sounds. But I guess
they
look,
were
if
always
you're-
dance pop artists.
But yeah, if that's what you're trying to, if you're trying to relive your freshman year, then you go back to that same sound.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't know that Kesha will have any more huge hits or anything, but I think she will always have her audience. She can always tour. She will have fans who will check out her new albums, and that's not a bad place to be.
Yeah.
When you're still loved and can still do what you want to do.
It also helps that she was walking around LA very scantily clad for a while, shooting some of the art for the album,
Right.
and attempting. What was the video we got of her trying to shoot a music video at a gas station?
Right.
And the gas station attendant came out and he's like, "You can't shoot here."
Yeah, they didn't. So again, Kesha and Katy Perry shooting videos they didn't exactly have permission to shoot.
Exactly. They both got in trouble shooting their music videos.
Trying to sneak and do it. One thing that was really, really big in around 2010, and it wasn't a specific artist, it was a style. And it didn't have a name at the time, but are you familiar with the phrase stomp, clap, hey?
I'm not.
So think about if you physically do that. If you stomp, you clap, and you yell hey.
Well, then, yes, that does bring up memories of one particular song,
Well, a
one
lot of
particular artist.
I think Mumford & Sons.
Them, yes, also. The
The
Lumineers.
Lumineers, they were the best example of this because they literally called their song Ho Hey. You remember this song? This hit in 2011. You remember this song.
Oh, yeah.
I belong with you, you belong with me, you're my sweet home. I belong with you.
So yeah, after the fact, a few years later, people, like some music snobs who hated this kind of music, the band of Monsters and Men, all that kind of stuff with the acoustic guitars and the stompy thing,
Yeah.
and singing about home and yelling hey all the time. They started calling it stomp, clap, hey. And weirdly, those bands have not come back. Like Mumford & Sons can still tour, obviously, but they're not a hot thing right
Yeah.
now as far as current music. The Lumineers are not. But the sound has come back. So their genre has returned. So now Shawn Mendes put out a new song that uses that sound. Benson Boone, who's been one of the breakout new stars of 2024, is using that sound. But the king of it all, the Mumford & Sons of 2024, is Noah Kahan. This is his huge hit, Stick Season.
Vermont, but it's the season of the sticks, and I saw your mom, she forgot that I exist.
Kids these days love that.
Yeah. It's an upbeat alternative to sort of the dance synth
Yeah.
sound.
Which
I
is
like it.
Funny
I like
because
it.
that was
Kinda-
really, really. You remember like early 2010s, that EDM turbo pop sound, like Gaga's early
Right,
records.
right.
Rihanna did a bunch of it. That dance sound was so huge then, and that hasn't really come back yet. I mean, we still have DJs and EDM
Right.
and all that, but it's not what it was. The most up tempo music now is that. It's like sad guys with
I get it.
guitars stomping
Yeah.
their feet.
I did not know what it's called again.
Stomp, clap, hey. Because just
Stomp, clap, hey.
think if you just physically,
Yeah. Stomp,
Hey!
clap, hey.
that's what all those songs kind of sounded like.
I got a song I'm putting together in my head. I think I might.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'll have a top 10 hit.
Oh, you never know. You never know.
Stomp, clap, hey.
You can jump in on this wave right now that's reminiscent of a wave from 15 years ago.
Right.
And other big artists before we move on that were around that time, obviously Taylor Swift was huge in 2010. Her Speak Now album came out. It was her third album. And as big as she was then, and she was very big then.
Now is
I always even then,
otherworldly.
you knew she was going to be around for a long, long time.
Oh, for sure.
But it's weird that she's still getting bigger. Every new
Yeah.
album breaks sales, so she is the prom queen. She is the most likely to succeed. I guess.
Right. And I guess if you're unlike everybody else so we've talked about people who've done very well, but what Taylor Swift has done is I really haven't. I feel foolish that we did an episode. I don't know how long ago.
Yeah.
But you should check it out. It was a good episode. It feels a little dated now from what we've seen. That we are even having this conversation about whether or not she is.
Oh, she is. It's not even a question. She's one of the biggest, most dominant artists of all time. She is up there with Michael and the Beatles and Elvis and all that we talked about.
I know
She
that
is.
she shouldn't think about it this way, but I already have, which is, what does she do next? Like, what's the
I think
next
this is it.
tour that could even,
But
can't match this.
But you keep thinking that, and then she keeps doing it. And so she'll find a way. And even if she doesn't, say this is the peak.
Right.
She could
It's a hell of a
gradually come down for 20 years and still
Right.
be the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Some of the other big acts, some people, Drake was only in his second year as a major artist in 2010. Best I Ever Had hit in 2009. Drake is still huge. He's taken some L's this year.
taking a couple of lumps here and there.
But he hasn't released a new album since the whole Kendrick beef, so we don't know yet exactly how that's
I
going
think
to
it's
affect.
smart for him to wait.
Yeah,
You got to wait a little bit. You got to kind of fade away, disappear,
Yeah.
and then let people want to hear. I mean, yes, he definitely took a loss there with the whole Kendrick battle. And if he had it to do over again, I'm sure he would say,
Yeah.
I should have just backed out of this thing. But he's still Drake,
He's
and he's
still
still
Drake.
going to, and next year, probably, if not the end of this year, he'll put out something. And again, if it's a hit,
it'll be
It's a
big.
hit.
I mean, he's still, like we said, he's still Drake.
Right.
Some other people who debuted in 2010, Nicki Minaj hit in 2010, and it feels like she's been around longer
This
than
is
that.
crazy, really?
Yeah, her
All
first
those people came out in 2000.
like 2009, 2010. Nicki Minaj, J. Cole debuted in 2010, had his first charted song that year. Justin Bieber was in his second year of having big hits. And it's funny because J. Cole and Nicki Minaj, of course, were still huge. Rihanna, who had been a few years in the game at that point, she was a dominant, massive artist in 2010. Rihanna and Bieber are still huge, but they've just kind of retired, sort of.
Yeah,
I mean, it's only been 3 years since Bieber's last album, but now
that feels like a long time.
It does
3
for-
years is a long time for an artist nowadays to
for a
not
pop
put out.
star.
Yeah.
And now that he's having a baby, I think he's probably not going to want to jump into
Although maybe
putting a
he'll
new
be
album out.
maybe he'll be inspired.
maybe, but will we want to hear it? I'm not,
Well,
I'm not
that
even saying that
depends.
as a knock on Justin Bieber, but a lot of times when artists are happy, it's not as much fun as when they're sad. And when there's not drama, and I mean,
This is accurate.
so much of Bieber's, I think his fans love his music, and he makes great pop music. But a lot of the interest early on was him and Selena Gomez dating, who also had her first top 40 hit in 2010. There's not that anymore. We know he's happily married, but there's no drama with
Yeah.
Haley. They're having a kid, very happy for them. He's in his 30s now, which is still very young, but he's been around for 15 years, and that's a long time for a pop star.
You're saying nobody wants to hear about Happy Bieber's
No,
life?
I don't know. I mean, his first hit was Baby, so maybe he just maybe he remakes Baby,
Oh,
but literally for his baby now.
yes.
I kind of wouldn't hate that because Baby's a really catchy song. I mean, it is, but
That's
I'm
not a
just-
bad idea.
Bieber definitely next time he drops an album or does anything, it will be huge because he's still Justin Bieber,
Right, and
people still care.
and the fans are there, and
But I just wonder if, like Rihanna, if he's lost a little interest in it.
Yeah,
They've found
could be that.
happiness in life. Rihanna's a billionaire mogul with her kids now and A$AP Rocky. Why would she want to
and why did
play
they don't
the
want
pop star game again?
right? And they don't want to go on tour, and if you're, it's almost like, and I don't know if this is the math that they're doing in their head is, what's the point of going through all the work of putting out an album that you're not going to make that much money on, right? Because
Right.
even if it streams like crazy, you still don't make the money that you used to.
And neither of them
So-
needs it.
And they don't
certainly.
need it. And so the only way to really make money is to tour on that album, but they don't want to tour. They don't
Yeah.
want to tour. They don't want to live a tour
Bieber
life
ended his
anymore.
last tour because he
Right.
had some physical health issues, some mental health issues, and I think he just didn't want to do it.
So you don't
And
have
it's
to do an
exhausting.
album, but you know what they could do just for the fans is just do a single.
Yeah,
Just
just
do a
drop
single
something.
here or there.
And they might.
Yeah.
I mean, Rihanna did the Wakanda Forever
Right.
Lift Me Up song.
The problem with Rihanna is when she does a single, then everybody just
Well, she's been
creates the
teasing that
hunger.
album for how many years now? I mean, it's been 8 years since her last album came out, which is hard to believe. But
Wow.
yeah, so those are the two that were the popular kids that didn't show up to the reunion,
Right.
and you're like,
they're
well,
too cool.
where are they? What are they up to? But we all know what they're up to.
Yeah, we all know what they're up to, and we understand why they didn't show up.
Yeah.
We were waiting for the helicopter to land right next to the picnic, but it didn't happen.
And no matter how many times they don't show up, you still hope they will. And you're like, maybe this time they're going to do it. So I don't know. We'll see if and when either of them comes back.
Yeah.
It'll be big.
I gotta say, I'm impressed. I never realized that 2009, 2010.
It
had
was a
that
big
many
time.
huge artists that came out. It reminds me of the early '80s.
Yeah, when you just saw like
See, I had
everything
to harken
sort
back.
of
I had to make it old manish for just a moment.
Yeah, it's just there's certain times where you do see sort of a changing of the guard. And I think we're kind of in one right now, even though
Right.
you still have Taylor and Drake. I think we've seen so many big artists this year hit, and some may go on to be huge acts. Chapel Roan's got a lot of momentum behind her. Shabuzi's off to a
Oh, yeah.
pretty good start on his career.
Yep.
Benson Boone, Teddy Swims. There's been a lot of people this year. But yeah, I think you didn't see a lot of old timers still hitting big around 2010. Beyonce, of course, who wasn't that old at that point. Usher was still getting hits in 2010.
Oh yeah.
His song OMG was that year. And then he Headlined the Super Bowl this year. He's still a big deal. Still got a big tour.
And still got a big tour
And
going.
had a new hit. His song Good Good hit the top 30 this
Oh,
year.
did it?
Yeah.
All
Like
right.
a legit hit. Pink was still big in 2010. She'd been around 10 years at that point. Pink's not having hits anymore, but she does not need to.
Right.
Her new albums will do well. Her tours will always sell out. So, again, not a bad place to be.
A pretty impressive class.
Yeah, but there's some things that have been stuck since 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about like stomp, clap, hey coming back. Other genres, we said EDM has not really come back in a big way like it did then. Dubstep, where is that these days? Remember dubstep
Yes.
and the wob 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 wob, all that kind of stuff? That has not made a return yet.
Not
Maybe
back
someday.
yet. Maybe another 10 years. Give it another 10 years.
One of the biggest acts of 2010, and historically, just chart wise, the first act to have over 200 songs make the top 200. And to this day, one of only 3 acts, Drake, Taylor, and this act are the only 3 ever to chart over 200 songs. And this act is done for lots of reasons. The Glee cast. Now, there is a time capsule for you.
Eric, get out of here. You want me to believe that the Glee cast
207
had 200 songs that charted?
Because every episode they'd have 4 or 5 songs, and they would release them all. And back in the iTunes download days, this was pre-streaming as a big thing. Fans would buy all these songs, and they would all pop on the chart for a week or two and then fall off.
But when
And-
you say
but every
chart,
episode-
that means that you just mean they were in the
in the
top.
Hot 100.
Okay, Hot
Yeah.
100, but they weren't like massive hits.
I don't think any of I'm not sure any of them ever got to even 10 weeks on the chart. Most of them like 1 or 2,
Right.
maybe 3 if it was a bigger hit.
Wow.
Because the next week another episode would air.
And
Last
there'd
week's
be
songs
other
would go away and
songs,
then the
right.
new ones would come. This was a little bit of one of their few top 10 hits they had. It was a cover of Katy Perry. Actually, I kind of like this version of it because it doesn't just sound like a karaoke version. They redid it like a choir
Right.
vocal thing. This was the Glee version of Teenage Dream.
Feel like I'm living a teenage dream. The way you turn me on, I can't.
But Glee was a moment. Do you
Oh.
remember how big that show was?
Yeah. Yeah, we were covering every single person
Everything.
on that show constantly.
And of course, Glee's not going to have any more hits because one, the show has ended, and it's still bizarre. And we can give a shout out to our sister podcast, The Last Days, with Jason Beckerman
Yeah.
and Derek Kaufman. They did some episodes about the so-called curse of Glee. Because who in 2010 would have thought that within a decade, or slightly over a decade, Corey Monteith, Mark Saling, and Naya Rivera would all be dead, and on very different,
And very-
tragic circumstances. Yeah, I mean, we don't need to get into all that, but just not what you would have imagined in
No.
2010.
For a show like
Like Glee.
It's called Glee.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's
But
weird.
it was such a huge thing. And yes, 207 songs. And it took years before even Drake and Taylor caught up and then eventually passed it. Drake's over 300 at this point. Because, when he releases an album, every
Right,
song
and
charts. That's
everything.
because of streaming. But yeah, Glee was breaking records back then.
I got to tip my hat to Glee. I did
Yeah,
not because I didn't watch the show. I was aware that they did these songs, and every now and then I would hear some of the versions, but I didn't realize that
Their
they were
version
all,
of Don't Stop Believin' was like the first big thing that kind of made the show the phenomenon that it was.
Right.
And it was part of that time when everyone was obsessed with Don't Stop Believin'. It was on The Sopranos, Family Guy used it, Journey had sort of a comeback because
Right.
of it. But yeah, but Glee, that is something very much left back in 2010. Some other big songs, and if you were in high school yourself around then, this is going to make you feel a little nostalgic. Some of these are just for fun. just for fun, some
So
jams
these
from
are
back
some
then.
songs that were definitely jams back then, but they're not, as I like to call, forever jams. Like
No.
songs that you hear and you're like, yeah, turn that up.
You don't
No
really
matter-
hear most of these songs at all anymore, depending on what you listen to or what playlist you listen to. But if you hear them, if you're around, then you're like, oh my God, I remember this song.
All right.
Number one hit from the fall of 2010. You remember the Far East Movement?
I remember
One of the first Asian American acts ever to have a
Yep.
number one hit. With Cataracts and Dev featured on it. This is Like a G6.
Feeling so fly like a G6. Like a G6. Like a G6.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that song, one, a word that will sum up 2010. Remember the lyric in the song? She's like, getting slizzard.
Yes, yeah.
Slizzard was getting very,
I do
very drunk.
remember. Yes, I do remember.
And that song did not
phrase.
invent that word. Outkast used it on So Fresh, So Clean almost a decade before. They dropped the word slizzard. It goes back to the 90s. But I think most people, if you hear that word, you associate it with that. And
Right.
part of the cool thing, so Like a G6 is about the Gulfstream 6. It's a plane. That plane did not exist when that song came out. There was only a G5. And they said
So they just decided
Yeah.
G5. What's better than a G5?
So the story is Drake had a song where he mentioned that he was friends with pilots at like G4 pilots, and they thought, well, what's better than a G4? A G6. Part of the reason also is the original version of like a G6. The lyric said it was like sipping on scissor like 3-6. It was a reference to the 3-6 Mafia and their song "Sipping on the Syrup." So they just changed it. Like, what rhymes
Just
with
fit
3-6?
with the rhyme?
G6. So they invented this plane that didn't
Sometimes
exist.
rhymes are more important than facts.
But what's really cool for the Far East movement is that in 2016, 6 years after that song was a hit, Gulfstream did unveil the G6.
And did they use the song at the?
I don't know. It would be a really missed opportunity if you didn't. But yeah,
So
they were very
where's
forward-thinking.
Far East movement now? What?
No idea. And they had some other hits. They had the song "Rocketeer" with Ryan Tedder from One Republic. I liked that song. They had a little moment, but it didn't last. That was their moment.
All right, you take what you get.
Yeah. This next guy debuted in 2010, but did not quite endure the way Nicki Minaj and J. Cole and Bruno Mars have. His first song actually debuted at #1, and so it's technically his only #1 hit, but it's not the song people remember. His song "Break Your Heart" with Ludacris, because a Ludacris feature was still a thing in 2010.
Right.
But Tayo Cruz, after "Break Your Heart," his second song, this song only got to #2, but I think it's a much better known song. This was "Dynamite."
Cause we gon' rock this club. We gon' go all night. We gon' light it up like it's dynamite.
Sometimes I put my hands up in the air.
That's
You
still
remember
a
that
song. That's still a song that you might hear on a playlist.
Sometimes, yeah. But it's very much that sound, that like techno, poppy, ravey, clubby kind of sound that was so big back then. Last one we're going to talk about. If nothing else, this helped give the world Kate Upton. Speaking of 2010 time capsules.
I know, yes.
Because she went viral learning how to do a dance. Before there was TikTok, you see, people think TikTok invented viral dance challenges. No, it just was harder to do when you didn't have an app showing you. But there were dance songs that went viral. Back in the 60s, the twist went viral. Before kids even, there was no internet. There was barely television.
I love that you just put this song in the same category as the twist. And I guess it is.
Well, I'm just saying it's something, a song about how to dance or a certain kind of dance.
Sure.
This was Cali Swag District. Teach me how to Dougie.
Teach me how to Dougie. Teach me how to Dougie. Teach me how to Dougie. Teach me how to Dougie.
Go ahead.
So the song.
You
No,
Dougie.
I'm not going to do it.
Come on, Charles. Teach me how to Dougie.
I'm not going to
you
do
know
it.
how to do it.
But that song is relevant again because everybody, like Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman.
Yeah. Maybe the first gentleman.
Yeah, could be the first gentleman, but that's sort of his entrance music.
Yeah.
There was a whole debate I saw, like whether or not they'll play that song at the DNC this week. I doubt they will, but it would be really cool if he walked out.
If he Dougied out to it.
Yeah, have him Dougie out before he introduces his wife. I don't know.
Kamal, I don't know how to do that. You're gonna have to teach me how. All right, Dougie, I'll teach you how to Dougie.
Yeah. But yes,
maybe
it
that
did
song's
bring
gonna
us.
blow up again. Maybe, but see, that's the thing. If you're like 15, 16 years old right now, and you are the target demographic for TikTok for these viral dances, you don't remember this because you were like a year old, maybe 2. So maybe
But you
they'll
might think
discover
it's
this song.
cool because it was from when you were around when you were born.
Also because if you see how to do the dance, you can pull that up on YouTube or anywhere. It's not insane to think this song could go viral now. And musically,
it's sort of rediscovered.
Yeah.
I love this thing about the internet, though, when people of a certain age discover something that you remember very distinctly because you lived through it and you were in your 20s or 30s, and now they're like, "Oh my gosh, did you know about?"
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
I remember, like in 2016, the Ghost Town DJs, their 1996 song "My Boo," re-entered the charts. Actually, peaked higher than it did in the 90s because kids online discovered it. Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush in 1985.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Peaked at number 30.
Was a much bigger hit this time.
Number 3. Number 3. Took it 30 years to go top 10. 40 years almost. And
that's the positive side of the internet for artists.
Right.
Whereas they're not making as much money now from music, but it can take an old song and make it something.
You know what's old is new again, and what's new is old. And like you said, looking at this list, a lot of these people from 15 years ago are still on top. And shortly after this, early 2010s, you have The Weeknd and Post Malone and all these people hitting who are still massive, massive stars.
Yeah.
So,
and getting bigger every year.
But nobody's on top forever. Just saying.
Except for Taylor Swift.
Except for Taylor Swift. Yes, she will always be number 1 forever, ever. Nobody will ever come close. We're seeing some new stars now. So maybe in 15 years, we'll see, is Chappell Roan still going to be on top? Still big a thing?
Olivia Rodrigo?
Maybe. Sabrina Carpenter, where's she going to be in 15 years?
Maybe.
Who knows?
Sabrina Carpenter might be in Katy Perry territory
Maybe.
in 15 years.
Or is she going to be more like a Taylor or Lady Gaga?
I think she would choose the Taylor and Lady
Yeah, I think
Gaga, but
anybody
we'll see
would.
how it goes.
We'll see. We'll come back here in 15 years and see how they're doing.
Right. Yeah, we will. Someone will.
Yeah, of course.
That is going to do it for us this week. Hope you've enjoyed our class reunion on Get to the Hook.
Little trip to 2010.
We will see you next week.